Alan Carter could not recall when he had last set foot upon the frozen earth of the northern tundra. But the sensations returned to him now in exquisite detail, as if no time had passed at all, and as if every crystalline snowflake retained the memory of his presence. Each gust of wind that swept across the endless stretch of wintry expanse seemed to greet him, whispering faint remnants of the solitude he had once cherished so deeply. With one hand clutching the heavy pack slung over his shoulder, he breathed in the vastness of the place he knew so well, and then proceeded onward, determined to reach his secluded hut before the gathering night could cast its deeper chill upon the ice. He moved along carefully, mindful of the rough terrain where patches of jagged stone and patches of slippery ice mingled in an unforgiving dance. The sun, pale and distant, hovered as a silver disk in the sky, offering only the faintest pretense of warmth. Its rays skimmed the horizon, illuminating the low-hanging clouds in a wash of diffused light, too delicate to melt the snow, but enough to guide him. Alan pressed on, the breath misting before his face in gentle clouds, as the hush of this remote world lulled him into a state that was nearly trance-like. His cabin, which he had built years ago with his own hands, lay at the western edge of a crescent-shaped vale, nestled among a thicket of resilient evergreen trees. Their needled boughs, laden with frost, appeared almost like silent sentinels guarding a forgotten kingdom. The building itself small, sturdy, constructed of thick logs and fitted with a roof that pitched high to shrug off the weight of snow, had stood through countless storms. Its rough-hewn walls bore a weathered veneer that told the story of seasons long past, of nights spent by the flickering fire, of days spent hunting caribou, and of a man choosing solitude when the clamor of the wider world had grown too loud. Years earlier, Alan had sought refuge here, tired of the politics, the intrigues, and the cyclical strife among nations back home. He had served in the Earth Coalition forces, a prestigious position that had taken him across continents and oceans, though never beyond the boundaries of his home planet. After all, Earth's involvement in deep space matters was still in its early stages, and few had ventured far into the cosmic unknown. Alan, however, had grown weary of human conflict. Retirement, for him, was this modest cabin, a sanctuary in a land that time seemed to have forgotten. As he approached the cabin, a curious feeling disturbed the stillness of his mind. An intuition, a veteran's sense, told him something was not quite right. There were subtle footprints that crisscrossed near the structure's edge, pressed into the thin crust of snow in a pattern that seemed neither purely human nor purely animal. He halted, heart pounding but mind clear, focusing on the strange impressions. For a moment, he wondered if some indigenous Arctic fox had circled the cabin, but the marks were too large, too deliberate. He felt a twinge of alarm, recalling that no one had been here for months. Certainly no friend, and hopefully no foe. His pulse quickened, though his soldier's training kicked in, instructing him to keep a firm hold on his emotions. Carefully, Alan walked around the perimeter, studying the footprints, trying to parse their meaning. The shape of the tracks resembled small boots, yet the depth implied someone light, agile, perhaps stealthy. Although faint, he noticed occasional lines brushing the snow's surface, like a trailing bit of cloth, or, more strangely, something akin to a tail. But that was absurd, he told himself. Fox prints overlapped with human footprints, maybe. That might explain the unusual pattern. Still, disquiet tugged at him. He opened the cabin door. Darkness greeted him, thick with the musty air of closed space. He reached for the lantern, found it exactly where he had left it, and lit it, the flame casting flickering shadows across the rough wooden walls. The interior was as he remembered, a single sturdy table, a narrow bed in the corner, a cast-iron stove near the back, shelves lined with old books, and the remnants of canned goods. But something else movement, slight and furtive, drew his eye to the side of the bed, as though someone had quickly ducked out of sight. "Who's there?" he called, voice echoing in the stillness. Only silence answered. He was not armed with anything more than a sheath knife, but that was enough to offer a measure of confidence. "I'm not here to harm you," he said, taking a step forward. Whoever you are, Doc, come out. This is my place, he added, his tone firm yet oddly calm. And I don't want trouble. There came a trembling sound, like shallow breathing. Then, from the shadowed corner, a figure emerged. Alan blinked in astonishment, for this was no ordinary woman. Her hair, which shimmered oddly even in the dim glow of the lantern, was the color of fresh fallen snow. Her eyes glinted in luminous gold, wide with fear, and from the top of her head protruded two triangular, fox-like ears covered in soft, tawny fur. She was slender, wrapped in a cloak that seemed ill-suited for the harsh cold outside, and indeed, she looked half-frozen. The strangest of all was the bushy tail swishing behind her, quivering with nerves. Alan exhaled, a mild sense of shock draining into wariness. Then something gentler. He had heard rumors, in distant corners of conversation, about otherworldly visitors, though official statements had always downplayed such possibilities. He never expected to see one, least of all here, in his lonely retreat near the tundra's edge. I'm sorry, she whispered, struggling to speak through chattering teeth. I just needed a place to hide. I didn't know whose cabin it was. I'm so sorry. Alan, old instincts guiding him, lowered the knife and tried to calm the tightness in his chest. It's all right. Let's not stand here in the dark, talking like this. He motioned to the stove. We need to get you warm. Now. She hesitated, clearly uncertain whether to trust him. But the desperation in her eyes hurt trembling fingers. Her obvious exhaustion seemed to decide the matter. Thank you, she murmured, following his gesture. He stepped aside, allowing her to move near the stove, where she knelt, hugging herself in an effort to coax warmth back into her body. Alan lit a few more lanterns, bringing a comforting glow to the interior. He examined the woman more closely. The fox ears, the tail, these were not some bizarre costume. They moved subtly with her every motion, a sign of genuine biology rather than any trick. He had never encountered an extraterrestrial personally, though the galaxy was rumored to be brimming with species, not all of which had made official contact with Earth. Maybe her people had, maybe not. There were too many unknowns. He busied himself with the stove, loading it with wood, stoking the embers until flames danced high. Heat blossomed, pushing back the chill that clung to the walls. I'm Alan. Carter, he said gently, not wanting to startle her. I live here, sometimes. What's your name? She lifted her gaze, eyes reflecting the golden firelight. Kara, she said, in a voice softly accented, but quite understandable. I'm sorry for intruding. I truly thought no one would find me here. I was desperate. Her gaze flickered toward the cabin door, as though expecting a threat to burst in at any moment. Alan nodded. You're safe for now. Kara, he assured her. If you don't mind my asking, how did you end up here, of all places? Kara's lips trembled, and fresh worry furrowed her brow. I was running, she began, her voice tight with anxiety. Running from my world, from Garrett and his son Lorden. They want to force me into a marriage, a political union that I cannot accept. My sister, Lyra, has been helping me in secret, but even she can only do so much. There's a device, a technology, that strips away our innate powers, and with that, they plan to corner me, to subdue me. So I came here, because I believed they wouldn't find me. She cast a sorrowful glance at the floor, but I fear they are close. I sense them. Alan's soldier instincts flared again, and he studied her carefully. She seemed sincere, her voice laced with genuine terror. And in this lonely corner of Earth, it made a strange sort of sense that an alien fugitive might choose such a remote hiding place. He did not quite understand what she meant by powers, but he could see she believed she had them, and that they were threatened by this device. All right, he said, trying to keep his voice calm. One thing at a time. First, you need to get warm. Then we'll see what's to be done about whoever's chasing you. He rose to his feet and retrieved a blanket from a small chest near the bed, handing it to her. Wrap up, please. I'll put on some water for tea. or something hot. Then we'll figure this out. Kara offered a faint, grateful smile, the tension in her features easing slightly. She took the blanket and drew it around her shoulders, tilting her fox-like ears in a gesture Alan imagined was the equivalent of a nod. "Thank you, Alan Carter," she said, voice hushed yet earnest. "I don't want to bring you trouble, but I'm afraid trouble follows me wherever I go," Alan sighed. "We'll handle it," he said, with more confidence than he actually felt. His memories of conflict, the training in tactical warfare, the discipline of a soldier, all stirred beneath the surface of his mind. But as he looked at Kara's frightened face, he realized he wasn't merely stepping back into an old role. There was an entirely new dimension here, involving alien politics, advanced technology, and the potential threat of an otherworldly tyrant. Yet, something in him resolved to help. He refused to abandon someone in need, especially here, on Earth. In his sanctuary, he busied himself heating water over the stove, rummaging for a small tin of tea leaves he had stored in one of the cupboards. Outside, the wind picked up. Swirling flurries of snow passed the window. The sky was already dimming, and soon, the frozen tundra would disappear into the gloom, leaving only a sense of isolation. Inside the cabin, however, a fragile alliance was taking shape, an alliance born of necessity and kindness. Kara remained near the fire, her trembling easing as warmth seeped into her limbs. Alan poured 2 cups of hot tea, handing one to her. She sipped, her golden eyes drifting shut in momentary relief. A silence stretched between them, but it was not entirely uncomfortable. When she finally spoke again, her voice was more composed, though still tinged with worry. "I am from a place far from Earth," she began. "My people, we have certain abilities, reality-bending powers, you might say, though that term is an oversimplification. For generations, we used them only sparingly, seeking balance with our environment, forging alliances with neighboring worlds. But Garrett, he rose to power through manipulation and intimidation, and his son, Lorden, is even more dangerous, prone to violent rages. They want to consolidate power by uniting prominent families, forcing arranged marriages. I was the heiress of one such prominent house." She glanced down at the cup in her hands, the steam wreathing her face in a delicate haze. Alan nodded slowly, absorbing this. "And this device that nullifies your powers, what exactly is it?" Kara swallowed hard. "A kind of advanced dampener, using quantum entanglement or something similar. I'm not an expert, but I know it can shut down the unique energy patterns in our bodies, rendering us effectively powerless. If they manage to use it on me, I won't be able to escape. I'd be forced to comply with their plans. My sister Lyra is trying to sabotage them from within, but she's treading carefully. One mistake, and she could end up at their mercy too." Alan cast a thoughtful gaze at the cabin door, as if he could see beyond it into the swirling Arctic night. The sense of foreboding pressed in on him, tempered by his growing desire to stand against tyranny, no matter how alien. "Well," he said, placing his cup aside, "I used to be in the military. I don't know much about interstellar politics or powers like yours, but I do know a thing or two about defensive strategy. We'll need to figure out how to keep you hidden, and if that fails, how to fight back." Kara's expression softened in gratitude. "Thank you, Alan," she whispered, voice trembling with relief. "I only hope we have enough time." Alan gave a grim nod. "We'll take each hour as it comes," he replied. "For now, rest, warm yourself. I'll stand watch tonight, tomorrow, at first light. We'll take inventory of what we have and plan for what might come." Night descended swiftly, the cabin enveloped in a hush broken only by the faint crackling of the stove. Alan sat by the window, peering out through the frosted glass at the endless expanse of white. A single lantern illuminated the interior with a soft glow, enough for him to see Kara, curled up beneath blankets near the stove, her fox ears twitching periodically in her sleep. He allowed himself a moment's reflection, recalling how he had once been posted in a region not unlike this, leading a reconnaissance unit across mountainous terrain. Those memories, though distant, kindled a faint spark of purpose. He had chosen isolation years ago to escape the cruelties of human conflict. Now, oddly enough, he was on the verge of confronting a threat not even from his own planet. Yet the principle was the same: someone needed help. Someone was in danger, and tyrants needed to be stopped. The old soldier within him stirred, not unwillingly. A faint scraping sound jolted him. He turned his head, senses on high alert. Silence again. He glanced at Kara, who remained asleep, then slid quietly from his seat. Creeping to the door, he pressed his ear against it. Outside, the wind moaned, carrying echoes of distant ice shifts. Then, there it was again, a muted scuff, the crunch of something stepping on snow. Alan's grip tightened on the doorknob. Someone, or something, was near. He stepped away and gently shook Kara's shoulder. She woke with a start, eyes wide. "Quiet," he whispered, putting a finger to his lips. She nodded, every muscle tensed. Suddenly, the door rattled, as if tested from the outside. Alan motioned for Kara to hide behind the table. Then, with heart pounding, he spoke in a loud, firm voice. "This is private property. State your name and your business." For a moment, no answer came. Then, with a hiss of static, a voice that sounded cold and arrogant replied, "We seek a fugitive. Stand aside." Human. Alan cast a quick glance at Kara, who had crouched low. Her expression was one of utter terror. Summoning his courage, Alan responded, "No fugitive here. Move along." A soft laugh crackled over the night air. "We know she is inside. We've traced the energy signals from her personal cloak. Do not attempt deception." Alan braced himself. "You're not welcome here," he stated through clenched teeth. "I won't let you take her." "Then you stand against the rightful authority of Garrett," the voice sneered. "You cannot withstand what we bring." At that, a heavy force struck the door, splitting the old timber. Kara stifled a cry, pressing herself flush against the table. Alan seized a small hunting rifle mounted on the wall, an old but serviceable weapon. The door cracked again, splinters flying inward. With a loud crash, it burst open, revealing two figures clad in dark, padded suits, faces partially obscured by masks. Their eyes gleamed with an otherworldly light. Alan fired a warning shot, the crack of the rifle echoing through the cabin. One figure dove to the side. The other raised a device that sparkled with bluish energy. Alan flung himself behind the bed, yelling at Kara to stay down. Another blast disintegrated part of the cabin wall, sending shards of wood showering into the room. The acrid smell of burning timber filled the air. "You see," the voice boomed, "your resistance is futile. Hand over Kara now." Alan felt his heart thudding, adrenaline surging. He had faced enemies before, but never ones wielding such technology. Still, he refused to yield. Taking careful aim, he fired again. The bullet grazing one intruder's leg, prompting a snarl of pain. Meanwhile, Kara, her eyes now flashing with a strange luminescence, seemed to muster a flicker of her own power. She stared at the second intruder, who froze momentarily, as though bound by invisible threads. The masked figure's body quivered, a faint distortion warping the air around him, as if reality itself bent to Kara's will. Yet, just as quickly as it began, it ended. A small device on the intruder's belt lit up with a sharp buzz, and Kara yelped in pain, doubling over as the shimmering distortion around her vanished. The intruder tore free of whatever hold she had managed to exert. Alan realized it must be the dampener she had mentioned. "Kara!" he shouted. But before he could fire another round, a third intruder, impossible to see in the chaos, knocked the rifle from his grasp. Alan fought back, trading blows in a flurry of fists and elbows. His military training took over, and he succeeded in knocking the attacker to the ground. But a baton of crackling energy struck him from the side, electrifying his nerves. Alan reeled, vision swimming, ears ringing. Kara sprang to her feet, her tail whipping behind her in panic. She tried to run for the door, but one of the intruders lunged, pinning her arms. "Got you," he snarled. "Your father has offered a high bounty for your capture." Kara struggled, her fox ears flattened. a desperate cry escaping her lips. Alan mustered every ounce of will, ignoring the pain coursing through his body. He drove his shoulder into the intruder's side, forcing him to release Kara. Together, Alan and Kara dashed outside, the freezing wind smacking their faces. Snow churned beneath their feet. Behind them, the intruders gave chase, shouting commands in a language Alan could not understand. "Over here," Alan hissed, grabbing Kara's arm and veering toward a cluster of trees. Gunshots, some energy-based. Others ballistic, whistled past, carving furrows in the snow. Kara stumbled, but Alan kept her upright, guiding her deeper into the shadows. The howling wind, combined with the darkness, offered some concealment, but not enough. They needed a plan, or a vantage point. "This way," Alan urged, recalling a small ravine a short distance away where the terrain dipped sharply. They pressed on, hearing the intruders' shouts drawing closer. The stinging cold bit through their clothes, but adrenaline drove them forward. Kara clutched Alan's sleeve, breath ragged. "I'm sorry," she panted. "I've brought destruction to your home." He shook his head, scanning the darkness. "It's not your fault," he managed between breaths. "We'll find a way out." The ravine loomed before them, an icy slope plunging downward. "Hold on," he said, tightening his grip on her hand. Together, they half slid, half fell down the slippery incline, loose snow cascading around them. With any luck, the intruders would lose track of them in the gloom. They took shelter behind a jagged outcropping of rock, hearts pounding. Alan peered back up the slope. The silhouettes of their pursuers appeared at the lip of the ravine, scanning the area with handheld devices that emitted cones of ghostly light. "They've got trackers," he murmured to Kara, jaw clenched. "We can't stay here." Kara's face was pale, her ears drooping with fear. "What if we go across the frozen lake?" she suggested, voice quavering. "They might not know the terrain as well as you do. Could we lose them there?" Alan considered. The frozen lake was dangerous, but if these intruders didn't understand the precarious thickness of the ice, they might be reluctant to follow too closely. "It's risky," he admitted, "but so's staying here." Another burst of energy fire lit up the night, exploding into the snow not far from their position. They had no choice. "All right," Alan said firmly. "Stay with me." Rising from cover, they sprinted deeper into the tundra, the icy wind stinging their faces, flurries swirling into their eyes. Gunfire echoed once more, but they pressed on. When they reached the edge of the lake, a vast, flat expanse, shimmering under the faint starlight, Alan knelt, placing a gloved hand on the ice. It felt solid, though he knew that hidden weaknesses could lurk anywhere. "We'll have to move carefully," he said. "Try to distribute your weight. Follow exactly in my tracks." Kara nodded, her breath fogging the air. Together, they ventured out onto the frozen surface. The lake groaned ominously under their combined weight, sending chills that had nothing to do with the temperature through Alan's heart. Far behind, the shouts of the intruders and the glow of their searchlights cut through the dark. Carefully, step by step, the pair made their way across the slippery, reflective surface, each crunch of ice sounding painfully loud in the silence. Some distance in, with the far shore still a vague blur, Alan stole a glance behind. He could see 3 or 4 beams of light descending the slope to the lake's edge. Suddenly, one beam shone directly on Kara's white hair, reflecting with brilliant clarity. "Down!" Alan hissed, pulling her low, pressing them flat on the ice. Energy shots zipped overhead, leaving sizzling trails and brief flashes of blue-white. The night erupted with echoes of violence. Unable to remain stationary, they crawled forward, the frigid surface biting into their gloved palms and knees. Another shot rang out, striking the ice mere feet from them. A spiderweb of cracks spiraled outward from the impact, water seeping up. Alarm pulsed through Alan. "They'll break the ice if they keep shooting like that," he muttered. Desperation surged in Kara. "Alan, maybe." "Maybe I can do something," she whispered, though doubt plagued her eyes. If I can push the dampener's radius away for just a moment. Before Alan could protest, she closed her eyes, gripping the ice with her hands. A faint, golden glow enveloped her body. Far off, one of the intruders shouted in surprise. "She's trying to use her powers!" Another energy blast rang out, but this one veered wildly, missing Kara by a wide margin. Alan caught a glimpse of something intangible, a ripple in the darkness. As if Kara were summoning an otherworldly force, the shimmer battled against the dampener's field, which crackled angrily like static in the air. Then, with a gasp, Kara slumped, her vision faltering. "I can't maintain it," she whispered. "Not with that device so close." Alan grasped her arm, steadying her. "Don't strain yourself," he urged, though he appreciated her attempt. Above them, beams of light flickered, scanning. The intruders were hesitant to shoot at the ice beneath their own feet, which gave Alan a spark of hope. There was nothing for it but to crawl onward, hearts pounding. Bit by bit, they inched across the treacherous ice. At length, the lights behind them receded somewhat, as if the intruders took a more cautious route or attempted to circle around. Alan seized the opportunity. "Now," he whispered, urging Kara to stand and move as quickly as they dared. The ice moaned in protest, but held. They reached the far shore, scrambling up onto solid ground. Once there, they sprinted into a dense stand of skeletal trees, branches rattling in the wind. Finally, they allowed themselves a brief pause, leaning against the thick trunk of a pine, breathless and shivering. Kara's face was etched with sorrow. "You're home," she managed, her voice wavering. "We left it in ruins." Alan swallowed hard, his heart heavy at the thought of his ravaged cabin. It had been his sanctuary, his escape from a world of strife. Yet, the soldier in him knew that material losses could be mended or replaced, lives, less so. "It's all right," he said, meeting her gaze. "We'll figure something out. For now, we have to keep moving." A sudden rustle behind them caused both to spin. A flicker of movement passed between the shadows. Alan tensed, raising his fists, half expecting another assailant. Instead, a slender figure emerged, a woman with the same fox-like ears, though her hair was a glossy black. She wore garments reminiscent of Kara's style, and her golden eyes, wide with concern, fixed on them with urgency. Before Alan could react, the newcomer hissed, "Kara, are you all right?" in a voice that trembled with both fear and relief. Kara gaped. "Lyra," she breathed, stepping forward. How? How did you get here?" Lyra cast a quick glance over her shoulder, as if expecting pursuit. "I've been tracking you, sister, using the faintest traces of your life signature that remain undampened." "Father?" She spat the word with contempt as forces combing the area, but I managed to slip away. "Listen, we don't have much time. Lorden is close by, and he's carrying a stronger dampener." Kara's face went pale. "Lorden," she repeated, dread saturating the single word. Alan remembered Kara's warning. Lorden was violent, unstable, the son of Garrett who intended to claim her in a forced marriage. "We have to stay ahead of them," he said, glancing at Lyra. "If you've got any plan, now would be the time to share." Lyra pressed her lips together. "I do have a plan, though it's dangerous. We can't just run forever. Not on this planet. Eventually, they'll corner us, especially with Father's technology. But if we can destroy or disable the dampener, Kara's powers and mine will be free. We'll have a chance to overpower them." Alan mulled this over. "And how do we destroy it?" Lyra's expression turned grim. "We must get close enough to sabotage it from within. Father's device is sophisticated, but it has a weakness, a failsafe, in case the dampener malfunctions and imprisons its user's powers by mistake. If we can trigger that failsafe, it'll blow out the entire system. However, to get near it, we'll have to face Father and Lorden. They'll be well guarded." Kara rubbed her arms, anxiety rippling through her. "I can't bear the thought of confronting them directly," she murmured. "But maybe it's the only way." Alan heard the distant echo of shouts across the tundra, the voices carried by the wind, They were running out of time. Let's move, he said decisively. Find shelter for the night. Somewhere we can plan. Then we strike at the dampener. Lyra nodded. I found a cave system earlier, south of here. It's partially hidden by large snowdrifts. We can rest there. Lead on, Alan said, stepping aside so Lyra could guide them. With that, the unlikely trio set off, slipping through the darkness, the moonlight casting faint shadows on the snow, the wind singing its lonely tune. Somewhere behind them, the intruders regrouped, plotting their next move. In the distance, lightning-like flashes occasionally illuminated the sky, perhaps a sign of advanced scanning technologies or localized weather manipulation. Alan steeled himself, determined that, come what may, he would see Kara safe and end the threat that had invaded his homeland. The cave was as Lyra described, nestled at the base of a jagged hillock, partially concealed by a large snowbank. They squeezed through a narrow aperture, descending a short tunnel. Inside, the air was marginally warmer, and they discovered a hollowed chamber where they could gather. Alan set down his pack, which he had managed to keep through the chaos, and pulled out a flashlight. The beam revealed glistening walls of ice that reflected the light in fractured rainbows. It would have been almost beautiful had they been there under less perilous circumstances. Kara and Lyra exchanged a tender hug, relief mingling with the tension of the night. I'm so glad you made it, Kara murmured, voice quavering with emotion. I was certain Father's men would stop you. Lyra's jaw tightened. I was careful. If they discover my betrayal, my position in the court will be forfeit. But I've been waiting for a chance to help you escape. I only regret it has come to violence. Alan crouched, rummaging in his pack for supplies. He produced a small emergency blanket, handing it to Kara, and then found another for Lyra. This is all I have left, I'm afraid. Are you two all right for food and water? Lyra nodded. I brought some rations from the ship that brought me here. We can share them. She withdrew several small packets from an interior pocket, containing compressed, nutrient-rich bars. Alan accepted one, chewing thoughtfully, tasting something akin to dried fruit mixed with an unfamiliar spice. When they had eaten, Lyra sat cross-legged on the ground, crossing her arms over her knees. Father is not far. Lorden leads a group of elite guards, each equipped with smaller dampeners. The main device is near their ship, presumably hidden. Father rarely risks carrying it on his person, in case it backfires. That may be our best chance. Alan studied the walls, thinking of possible ambush tactics. If we can lure them into a spot we control, he said, someplace with limited escape routes, we could hold them off long enough to destroy the device. But that's easier said than done. They have superior firepower, advanced scanners, and they know we're out here. Kara nodded, her tail swishing lightly in agitation. We also have to be mindful of Earth authorities. If they see energy blasts and alien technology, they may intervene in unpredictable ways. We don't want an international incident. Alan ran a hand over his face, feeling the exhaustion of the day's events, but also the stir of determination. I doubt many humans will be out this far. Still, you never know. Let's keep this contained if we can. Lyra leaned forward, her golden eyes reflecting the flashlight's glow with an uncanny shimmer. Kara, do you remember that trick we practiced as children? The one that binds illusions into physical form? Kara frowned, vaguely. Yes, but it was always too advanced. We never mastered it. And now, with the dampeners. Lyra's lips curved in a small, cryptic smile. But the main dampener is the real threat. The smaller ones are less potent individually. They rely on the central unit for continuous power. If we can isolate one guard, just one for a moment, we might find a gap in the dampener's radius, enough for you or me to conjure a protective illusion or conjure a diversion. Alan's mind raced with the possibilities. So you want to create a scenario where the guards are scattered, forcing them to rely on their small dampeners that might have weaker ranges. Correct. Lyra nodded. Exactly. If we can split them, we can exploit the gaps. Kara chewed her lip in thought. Maybe, she said slowly. We could set up a trap near the wreckage of an old facility or a collapsed mine, somewhere that offers cover and natural obstacles. Then, once they're drawn in, we pick them off piece by piece. Alan considered the geography of the region. He recalled an abandoned mining station roughly 20 miles southeast of his cabin. It had been deserted for decades, the buildings crumbling under relentless winters. Yes, he murmured, that might work. There's a mine near an old facility not too far from here. If I recall correctly, it'll be a trek, but if we make good time tomorrow, we can reach it. The place has multiple entrances, some collapsed tunnels, steel beams, and heavy machinery left behind. Could be a good place to set a trap. Lyra exhaled, as if relieved to have a plan, however risky. Let's do it, then. We need to rest now, recover our strength. Father and Lorden won't expect us to move so quickly. We can leave at first light. Alan and Kara exchanged determined nods, though fear lurked behind their eyes. They all understood the stakes. If they failed, Kara would be taken, forced into a marriage that would cement Garrett's power. Lyra, exposed as a traitor, would likely face dire consequences. And Alan, well, he had risked his life once more for a cause that was not strictly his, yet one he believed in deeply: the fight against tyranny. In any form, on any world, with a few final words of affirmation, they settled in as best they could. Sleep did not come easily. The mind filled with ominous echoes of the day, and the wind outside moaning like a wounded beast. But eventually, exhaustion overcame them. Dawn broke in a pale hush over the Arctic expanse, the sky a tapestry of pastel blues and frosted pinks. The three companions emerged from the cave, stiff and cold, but resolute. They set out at once, trekking southward, following Alan's memory of the old mine's location. On the way, they skirted low hills and frozen wetlands, carefully monitoring the horizon for signs of pursuers. Lyra took point on occasion, using a handheld device to scan for the presence of any dampener fields. Periodically, she would motion for them to hide behind a drift or cluster of rocks as she detected faint signals. But each time, she concluded the signals were at a distance, probably scouting patrols searching the area. They made good progress, despite the cold. Alan's training had instilled in him the will to press on, despite fatigue and numbness. Kara and Lyra, too, seemed physically capable beyond normal human standards, though the dampener's threat clearly weighed on them. Once, they paused to observe a flight of peculiar drones crossing the sky, each one exuding a barely visible wave of distortion. Lyra warned them that those drones were for deep scanning, likely searching for Kara's signature. However, the trio remained undetected, crouched behind a rise of snow until the machines passed. By late afternoon, the looming silhouette of a dilapidated structure took shape in the distance. Rusted beams jutted from the snow in skeletal outlines, marking what had once been a processing station for minerals excavated from beneath the tundra. Nearby, the entrance to the mine gaped like a black wound in the icy ground. Alan paused, scanning the area with binoculars he'd salvaged from his cabin. "I don't see any sign of enemy movement," he said quietly. "Let's get inside before the light fades. We can rig some defenses." They pressed on, stepping through the twisted remnants of a chain-link fence. The wind whistled through broken windows, scattering old debris across the snow. Inside the central building, half the roof had collapsed, forming a mound of shattered timbers and corrugated metal. Beyond a rusted door, a tunnel led down into the mine's depths, encrusted with icicles. The air here felt stale, tinged with the odor of damp earth and rusted steel. Alan led them to a side chamber, a storage area that still housed a few large crates and equipment stands. "This is as good a place as any," he said. "We have cover, and if we need to retreat into the tunnels, we can." Kara moved about, testing her voice. The old walls echoed faintly. Lyra lit a small electric lantern she carried, illuminating the gloom. They consulted quietly, formulating how best to lure Garrett's forces here. "We know they're scanning," Lyra pointed out. "If I allow a small trace of my power to slip through, they'll detect it. It'll be risky, But it should draw them in. Alan nodded. We'll set up a few traps in the main corridor, funneling them toward us. If they approach in a group, we'll force them to split up. Then, hopefully, one of you can do something about that dampener. Kara drew a shaking breath. We have to destroy that device, or we'll never truly be safe. And so they worked. Alan salvaged what materials he could, setting rudimentary traps, tripwires rigged to fallen beams, precarious stacks of rubble that could be toppled to block pathways, and, where possible, old mining equipment that could be made to collapse on command. Meanwhile, Lyra prepared to send out the faintest pulse of her power, a beacon that would alert Garrett's forces to their whereabouts. Kara observed quietly, wanting to help, yet uncertain how to best leverage her half-restricted abilities. They finished as evening descended in a hazy gloom. The wind moaned through the mine shafts. Lyra exhaled. Time, she said, sounding apprehensive. We can't delay this forever. Let's see if Father takes the bait. She closed her eyes, placing one hand over her heart. A faint luminescence stirred around her fingertips. Like candlelight, Alan felt a strange prickling on his skin, as if the air had gained an electric charge. Kara watched, her tail sweeping nervously. Then Lyra released the energy, letting it ripple through the building's corridors. It was barely perceptible, but enough for any advanced scanner to notice. They waited. Minutes crawled by, each one a subtle torment of suspense. At length, Kara stiffened, her ears perking. They're coming, she whispered. I can feel them, close. A moment later, Lyra's handheld device beeped urgently. She glanced at the screen, eyes widening. Yes, she confirmed, multiple signals approaching from the north, maybe half a mile away. Father's heading up the group, and Lorden is with him. Her voice wavered slightly at the mention of her volatile brother. Alan gave a short nod, checking his makeshift weapon, a hunting rifle he had recovered from the debris of a long-defunct security station in the complex. The ammunition was limited, but it was better than nothing. Positions, he whispered. Kara, stay behind that beam. Lyra, up on the catwalk. Keep an eye on that side entrance. I'll hold the main passage. We wait until they're fully inside. They hurried to their designated spots, hearts hammering. The old building felt like a ghost of industry long past, now set to host a confrontation from another world's drama. Outside, the wind carried faint shouts, muffled by the walls. Then came the sound of footsteps crunching across ice and rubble. Alan held his breath, pressing himself against the cold steel of a beam, rifle at the ready. Suddenly, a red beam of light scanned across the interior, slicing through the darkness. Alan ducked. Two figures entered, wearing the same dark suits as the intruders from before, each carrying advanced rifles that pulsed with energy. Behind them, a taller figure strode in, a man exuding an aura of authority. Clad in an ornate cloak, his face was etched with lines of severity, his hair a stark silver. He carried himself with regal bearing, though his eyes glowed with a ruthless edge. Alan guessed this was Garrett. Beside him stood a younger man, his features twisted with impatience, eyes flicking about like a predator. Lorden. An aura of menace hung around him, an unpredictability that made Alan's skin crawl. Lorden's gaze swept the area, sniffing the air as though searching for a scent. I sense, my dear sister. And Kara, he sneered, voice resonating off the walls. How considerate of them to wait here for us. Alan gritted his teeth, stepping deeper into the shadows. One of the guards moved forward, scanning with a handheld device. Their energy signatures are all over this place, he reported. But the signals are sporadic. It might be a trap. Garrett lifted his chin with arrogant calm. Of course it's a trap, he said in a cultured tone. My dear daughter thinks she can hide behind such simple tactics. Spread out, maintain dampener coverage, and locate them. The group split into smaller units, each soldier activating a personal dampener device that hummed with an eerie undertone. Alan waited for the right moment. He glanced up at Lyra, perched on a catwalk overhead, her face set in grim focus. Kara crouched behind a beam across the chamber, invisible from the intruder's vantage. Alan signaled with a slight nod. With a sudden clatter, one of Alan's rigged beams toppled, smashing onto the floor to block the corridor and pinning two guards beneath. Startled cries rang out. The remaining guards whirled, weapons raised. Alan took his shot, the rifle's report echoing in the cavernous space. One guard fell, his shoulder grazed by the bullet. Immediately, the others returned fire, beams of energy slicing the air. Alan ducked behind cover, heart racing as the rancid smell of scorched metal rose around him. Lyra leapt from the catwalk, landing gracefully behind a stack of crates. She concentrated, hands flickering with faint light. A swirl of illusion took shape, warping the air around one guard, making him stagger as though reality shifted under his feet. Then his dampener flared. Lyra gasped, pressing a hand to her temple as her power was forcibly cut off. But the momentary confusion allowed Kara to dart out, snapping a kick that knocked the guard's weapon away. Garrett watched with a strangely dispassionate expression, though annoyance showed in his narrowed eyes. Lorden, however, roared with fury, raising a small device that crackled ominously. "Enough of this," he bellowed, unleashing an arc of energy that slammed into the crates, splintering them into shrapnel. Lyra barely dodged in time, her eyes wide. Kara rolled aside, narrowly missing a blast from another guard. She pressed herself against a rusted support column, breath ragged. Alan fired again, trying to cover her. The shot ricocheted off a guard's armor, leaving a blackened groove but not disabling him. Suddenly, Lyra spotted something behind Garrett's cloak, a bulky device strapped to his back, with cables snaking around his waist. The dampener, she realized, voice carrying to Kara and Alan. "He's carrying it after all." Garrett heard her and scowled. "I do not trust others with such a crucial instrument," he said coldly, "and I will not allow you to sabotage it so easily." He raised an arm, unleashing a wave of energy from a wrist-mounted emitter. The shockwave tore across the chamber, knocking Kara off her feet and sending Alan crashing to the ground. Dust and debris rained from the ceiling. Lorden moved swiftly, eyes locked on Kara. "You will come with me, willingly or not," he snarled, voice brimming with mania. "No more games." He lunged toward her, but Alan intercepted, driving a shoulder into Lorden's midsection. They tumbled across the floor in a flurry of blows. Lorden's strength was formidable, inhumanly so. He pinned Alan, raising a crackling gauntlet to strike, but Alan twisted free at the last second, delivering an elbow to Lorden's temple. Lorden staggered, fury contorting his features. Meanwhile, Lyra focused her power, ignoring the painful static from the dampener. Her illusions shimmered in and out, weakening under the device's assault. Yet she pushed through the agony, forging a partial distortion behind Garrett. That flicker of altered reality caused Garrett to hesitate, gaze darting behind him. It was enough for Kara to scramble up, seizing a length of broken pipe from the floor. "Father, watch out!" shouted one of the guards. But it was too late. Kara swung the pipe, aiming for the device strapped to Garrett. The blow struck the dampener's housing with a resounding clang, but it did not break. Sparks flew, the device rattling against its harness. Garrett hissed in pain, staggering forward. But still, he stood. He turned, eyes blazing with a cold fire. "Insolent child," he spat. "You will regret that." He reached out a hand, pressing a hidden control on his wrist. The dampener's hum intensified, and Kara cried out, clutching her head as waves of disabling energy coursed through her. Lyra, too, faltered, collapsing to her knees under the device's expanded radius. Alan, locked in combat with Lorden, felt a tearing in the air, a vibration that thrummed in his bones. His own senses spun, though not as severely as Kara's. Lorden seized the moment of advantage, slamming Alan against a broken console. Pain radiated through Alan's back. He gasped, stunned. Lorden leaned in, breath hot and ragged. "You dare to defy me, human," he growled, raising the crackling gauntlet. Alan's vision blurred, but he would not surrender. Summoning the last of his strength, he reached for a jagged chunk of metal near his hand and drove it upward. Lorden jerked back, a cry of pain escaping him as the metal slashed across his arm. Snarling, he spun and kicked Alan's legs out from under him, sending him crashing to the ground once more. Across the chamber, Garrett advanced on Kara, who was struggling to stand, eyes filled with tears of pain. Lyra desperately tried to rise, but could barely move under the dampener's amplified power. More guards rushed in, securing the perimeter. The tide was turning against them. Garrett sneered at Kara, drawing a silver-bladed dagger from his belt. "You and I are returning home, Kara," he said in a low, menacing tone. "The wedding will proceed, your defiance notwithstanding. Lorden is a valued extension of my will, and once you join with our bloodline, all the realms will submit." Kara trembled, defiance and sorrow mixing in her gaze. "I will never," she began, but Garrett backhanded her, sending her to her knees. Alan tried to crawl forward, ignoring the throbbing pain in his ribs. "No!" he shouted hoarsely. But a guard planted a boot on his back, pinning him in place. Garrett lifted the dagger, preparing to drive it down in a final show of dominance. But in that instant, a shrill beep emanated from the dampener's housing, an alarm. Kara's earlier strike had dislodged some crucial component. Sparks danced along the device's edges, and the dampener wavered, its hum faltering. "Father!" one guard cried. "The device is destabilizing." Garrett's eyes widened with sudden realization. He scrambled to adjust the settings on his wrist control, but the internal failsafe, exactly what Lyra had mentioned, kicked in. With a series of pops and crackles, the dampener began to overload. A swirl of energy formed around it, crackling arcs dancing over Garrett's cloak. Sensing the shift, Kara felt a momentary easing of the suppressive force crushing her mind. She acted on instinct, tapping into the remnants of her reality-bending power. "Lyra!" she shouted, voice echoing. Lyra also felt the dampening field stutter, allowing her to gather a flicker of strength. Together, the sisters focused, forging a shimmering distortion in the air around Garrett. The illusions took shape like glowing ribbons, binding his arms, twisting around the malfunctioning dampener. Garrett howled in rage. Lorden, seeing his father ensnared, lunged forward with renewed fury. But Alan, freed from the guard's foot by the sudden distraction, tackled Lorden to the ground. They grappled amid the swirling chaos of energy. The dampener screeched with a feedback whine. "It's going to blow," one guard shouted, stumbling back in panic. Others followed suit, fleeing the chamber. In that moment, Kara and Lyra poured all their will into the illusions, containing the device's meltdown as best they could. Garrett struggled, cursing them, but the more he fought, the more tangles of shimmering force wrapped around him. At last, the dampener exploded in a torrent of crackling light. A wave of energy surged through the building, shaking the foundations, toppling debris. Alan and Lorden were flung apart, each rolling across the floor. Kara and Lyra stood at the epicenter, protected by a bubble of their combined powers. In the aftermath, Garrett slumped, his cloak singed. The device on his back shattered. For a long moment, the chamber was silent except for the hiss of settling debris. Alan coughed, shaking his head to clear his vision. Then, to his astonishment, he saw that Garrett was still conscious, though gravely wounded. His expression was twisted with rage and pain. Lorden, likewise, was trying to drag himself upright, blood staining his arm where Alan had cut him. Yet now, the field that had suppressed Kara's powers was gone. Energy flowed around her, shimmering with golden brilliance. Lyra's eyes gleamed like molten metal, illusions swirling around her. They stood in the center of the destroyed dampener's remains, no longer bound. Garrett, defiant to the last, forced himself to speak. "You think you've won," he rasped, spitting blood. "The marriage will happen. My forces, unstoppable." Kara stepped forward, sorrow mingling with resolve. "No, Father, your tyranny ends now. We are free," she said softly. Then she looked to Lyra, who nodded in understanding. With a graceful motion, Lyra conjured a translucent barrier that enveloped Garrett, sealing him inside like a prison of light. Lorden snarled, lunging at Alan. But Alan sidestepped and delivered a swift blow to the back of Lorden's neck. Weakened by injuries, Lorden collapsed, unconscious. Kara, summoning a strand of energy, bound Lorden's limbs in luminous cords, ensuring he could not break free. It was over. The guards who had fled were nowhere to be seen, likely escaping into the tundra. The main threat, Garrett and his son, lay captive. Kara sagged with exhaustion, the golden glow around her dimming. Lyra rushed to her side, supporting her. "We did it," Lyra murmured, tears glistening in her eyes. "It's finally over." Alan took a moment to catch his breath, surveying the wreckage around them. The old mine building was largely in ruins, but the trap had worked. He turned to the sisters, forcing a weary smile. "Are you both all right?" Kara nodded, giving him a look of profound gratitude. "Yes, Alan. Thanks to you. We're safe. I can never repay what you've done." He shook his head, voice low and sincere. "You already have, just by being free." For a fleeting moment, their eyes met, and he felt a warmth that transcended the bitter cold of the Arctic. Lyra exhaled, gazing at the flickering illusions containing her father. "So what do we do with him now?" Kara's expression was grim. "He must be taken back to face the judgment of our people. Once they learn of his crimes, the council will not be lenient." As for Lorden, she cast a sorrowful glance at the unconscious figure. "He needs help, or perhaps he'll face the same judgment. I don't wish harm on him, but he's made his choices." Lyra placed a hand on Kara's shoulder, sorrow and relief mingling in her golden eyes. "We'll bring them both back," she said. "We'll let the rightful authorities decide." Alan shifted, ignoring the sharp pain in his ribs. "How will you get back home?" he asked. "I assume your sister has a ship or a means of travel." Lyra nodded. "I arrived in a small vessel hidden a few miles from here. It's cloaked from standard detection, but we can use it to transport Father and Lorden off Earth. Kara, you should come too. We can finally rebuild our lives without fear." Kara hesitated, her gaze drifting to Alan. Her fox ears flicked, uncertainty clouding her features. I don't know if I'm ready to leave Earth yet," she admitted softly. "I've grown fond of some of its inhabitants." Alan felt a pang at the thought of her departure. Yet, he also knew that her life here would never be entirely safe if she remained hunted by her own kin. "You have to do what's best for you," he said, trying to keep his tone neutral, though the regret was palpable. Kara's gaze softened. "This world welcomed me when I thought I was alone. You welcomed me, Alan. I owe it a debt of gratitude. And I do believe that, with Garrett's tyranny ended, I'll be free to travel as I please. Perhaps I can visit again, once things are stable in my homeland." Lyra smiled gently, seeing the exchange. "Perhaps we can establish a formal alliance with Earth someday," she suggested, as if sensing the bond that had formed between her sister and the human who had risked everything for them. Alan managed a small grin, despite the pain in his bruised ribs. "I'd like that," he said, imagining a future where their worlds might coexist peacefully. "And, if you need help rebuilding, or you find more trouble, you know where to find me." Kara stepped closer, pressing her hands over his. Her touch was soft, her fox ears twitching in a gentle gesture. "Thank you, Alan Carter, for believing in me when I had no one else to turn to. Your kindness, your bravery. It means more than I can ever say. You've saved me, and in doing so, you've changed the course of my life." She paused, eyes warm. "I would very much like to come back and see you again." Alan felt something unspoken pass between them, a promise hidden within the hush of the ruined chamber. "I'll be waiting," he whispered, his voice low, but steady. The following morning dawned cold and bright, the Arctic sun casting long shadows over the battered mining site. Lyra guided them to where her craft was hidden beneath a cunning camouflage of netting and snowdrifts. With the dampener destroyed, her powers were partially restored, making it easier to manage illusions. Together, they loaded the unconscious Lorden and the subdued Garrett onto the ship, securing them in containment fields. Garrett glared at them with hateful eyes, but said nothing. Lorden remained silent, sullen and wounded, yet still dangerous if given the chance. Lyra, double-checking the craft's systems, turned to Kara. "Sister," she said, "we should depart soon. Father's loyalists might still be out there, but I doubt they'll challenge us now that he's defeated." Kara lingered near Alan, reluctant to say goodbye. "I won't be gone forever," she assured him, placing a small metal pendant in his hand. "Keep this. It's attuned to my life signature. Someday, when things are calm in my world, I'll return. Or you can use it to contact me through a specialized frequency." This is not the end of our story. Alan closed his fingers around the pendant, feeling its cool weight. "Until next time," he said softly, the words simple yet carrying deep emotion. She smiled, leaning in to press a light kiss on his cheek, her fox ears tilting in a shy, affectionate gesture. "Take care, Alan," she whispered. Lyra joined them, giving Alan a respectful nod. "We owe you more than we can express," she said. "You've proven that humanity has courage and heart. In time, perhaps our peoples can truly unite." Alan inclined his head, stepping back from the craft. "Safe travels. And remember, if you ever need help again," Kara and Lyra both smiled, finishing his sentence in spirit. "We'll find you," Kara promised. With that, the ramp closed, and the ship rose silently, stirring the snow in swirling eddies. Its cloaking technology flickered, bending the light until the craft vanished from view, leaving only the wind and the brilliant morning sun to bear witness to its departure. Alan stood there for a long while, gazing at the spot where the ship had disappeared. The bruises on his body ached, and his breath steamed in the frosty air. Thoughts tumbled through his mind, memories of a fox-eared stranger trembling by his stove, of a night battle on the frozen lake, of illusions dancing in the air while the dampener exploded in brilliant fury. He remembered the terror, the courage, and that undeniable spark of connection. After so many years seeking solitude, he had opened his heart once more, and in doing so, found a bond that spanned worlds. Eventually, he turned away, setting off toward what remained of his cabin, determined to salvage whatever was left and rebuild. For the first time in many years, he felt something akin to hope, warming him more than any fire ever could. Somewhere out in the vast cosmos, an unlikely friend, and perhaps more, was safe, free to reclaim her destiny. And someday, when the time was right, she would return, or he would go to her, no matter how far the distance. That bond would remain unbroken, linking Earth's northern tundra to distant stars. In that thought, Alan Carter found solace, and in the sky's silent expanse, he imagined a future where humans and Kara's people stood side by side, forging alliances not for conquest, but for freedom. Yes, this was a new beginning, a happy one, built on courage, unity, and the promise that love, in all its forms, could triumph over even the coldest darkness. He walked on, his footprints trailing behind him on the snow, leading, at last, toward a horizon shining with the promise of peace.